I was attacked by a ghost, a goblin, or a guardian spirit at West Kennet Barrow. I've always told people that spirit cannot hurt you. I may have to revise that. A photo of my ghostly assailant was captured by one of our parties. Stay to the end to view that.
Am popeth am nes i. Rwy'n hiraethu am adrau, roedd eisiau yn ôl. Rwy'n hiraethu am adrau, rwy eisiau dyn ôl.
After visiting Avery's stone circle, we went to a park up that was right beside the beautiful Silbury Hill. West Kennet Barrow is just a stone's throw away from Silbury. This is the sister Neolithic site to West Kennet Barrow. Silbury Hill is a monumental mound which stands over 30 metres high, built out of chalk and dug out by hand from the surrounding ditch. Its location is so close to the source of the River Kennett, it must have been of religious importance for these prehistoric people. These places were not constructed all at once, but in a number of stages over 50 to 150 years. For Silbury at first there was a small gravel mound to which people added dumps of soil, turf, chalk, sarsen stones from different places. Further chalk and rubble and organic materials were added to the mound, and a massive circular ditch 100 metres in diameter was dug around it. This ditch was then backfilled and dug out again at least 4 times as the mound gradually got bigger and bigger. These ditches are now hidden behind the mound, but by about 2300 BC, these sites were finished being constructed. West Kennet Barrow is one of the largest, most impressive and accessible Neolithic chambered tombs in Britain. It was built around 3650 BC, and it was used for a short time as a burial chamber for nearly 50 people. It is part of the Avery World Heritage Site. These massive stones were cut precisely and have experienced extreme weathering over 5,000 years, so it's hard to say what they were like when they were first cut. This site was filled in and had to be excavated.
My name is Corin Thistlewood, some people call me Corin the Druid, and I'm going to talk to you today about West Kennet Long Barrow. We visited there a little while back when Shay came over to visit Britain and the megalithic sites here, and I was helping them tour around, and we went to West Kennet Long Barrow one night. It was on the autumn equinox.
We'd just been to Avery Stone Circle and we'd done a ceremony there for the equinox. The night before we'd been, Jules and I had been outside and we had been filming the Aurora Borealis that was actually visible a great deal south. In fact, some people got some amazing photos due to the huge solar flare storms that were happening at that point in time. So there was a lot that was happening astronomically at that point in time. As we walked towards West Kennet Barrow, the sun was going down and we could see the moon coming up on the other side.
Hi, I'm Julie and I was with Shay and Corin when we visited West Kennet Long Barrow in September of 2024.
It was a very, very interesting night over at West Kennet Barrow, and this was on September the 18th.
And it was a very, very spooky night. We went up there as it got dark.
As soon as we got there, there was something very mystique about it. There was definitely a feel in the air around the barrow.
Anyway, as we got there, there were some people that were sitting up on top of the barrow already, and we were quite surprised. They were looking up at the sky and they were meditating, having a lovely time. So we paused at the start. We were overwhelmed by the sheer size of the place, but there was an aura coming out from it, and it just does make you pause. And we kept filming. Jules and I kept taking photos, but the light condenser on our camera seemed to work incredibly well. Some of the photos look almost like daylight, and we don't know how it did it because there was hardly any light. There were only a few stars where we were.
as often is the case when I go up there, it was a very dark, no street lights. It was the only natural light was coming from the stars, really, and the moon.
I was standing on top of the burrow. There was an eerie feeling. It was quite dark.
But there was a period where, as we walked towards the barrow, it went incredibly dark.
And we walked up there, and it was very fascinating because all over the place there was helicopters, strange lights in the sky, and we stood on top of the West Kennet Long Barrow, and we seemed to be surrounded by lights and strange things going on. I mean, I think there were possibly military manoeuvres going on at Salisbury Plain, entirely possible, but there was all sorts of other things going on that didn't seem to add up to anything of those nature at all.
There was a lot of activity. I could feel the energy. Standing directly above where Shay and Corin were downstairs and Jules, but I was standing up there alone, and I was watching the lights in the sky, and there was massive amounts of helicopters, which I know it sounds strange, but it took me back to that movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And I felt like building a mountain out of a potato. It was that kind of feeling. And it was really weird to see these helicopters constantly in the air and circling. And one would land somewhere and then one would take off somewhere. There was constant lights in the sky. It was a really dark evening. And
there was a lot of military activity in the area. Corin explained that quite often when there's crop circles, there will be a lot of military activity just before and just after. I used to do rituals and ceremonies in Tallebudgera Valley, and when we were doing rituals and there was a lot of psychic activity happening, we would get buzzed by the local military. So there is a secret military base at the end of Tallebudgera Valley that nobody's supposed to know about. Shh, don't tell anybody. But everybody up there knows. And there were some lights in the sky that we were looking at, and we were going, are they helicopters or are they just lights in the sky? That whole Salisbury Plain is well known for unusual lights, and of course the crop circle.
West Kennet Long Barrow is, well, archaeologists say it's a burial chamber. It's near enough 6,000 years old, much older than Stonehenge, and in it there was dozens and dozens of bodies found in it when it was excavated, because it remained closed for many thousands of years. It has massive, great big boulders, huge, heavy boulders covering the entrance, and the previous people had backfilled it. It had remained backfilled for a very long time until excavated by the archaeologists, and they took all this stuff out, and when they took it all out, they found perfectly preserved inside the barrow dozens of dead bodies in each of the chambers either side. There's 2 chambers on one side, 2 chambers on the other side, and a 5th chamber at the very head of the cave. And we went in there. We asked the guardians permission to enter. I noticed Shay asked permission to enter.
We were respectful when we entered. We asked permission of spirit to come in.
Ken, my partner, decided to go up on top of the burrow and have a look, because Corin told him there was a skylight and an air hole immediately above the chamber that we were in. So he went up to have a look at that. So we paused at the entrance to the burrow and we asked permission to go in. Each of us did. Corin first, then myself and Jules. And I actually brought a small offering that I left at the entrance as I went in, and I felt welcomed when I first went in.
We went inside and it was very dark inside. And
Burrow. As we entered, we observed that there were the spaces around us.
So there were 2 chambers, 2 on the right, 2 on the left, and a big chamber straight in front of us. Corin led us straight into the big chamber.
There was someone sleeping there for the night, and
as we got inside, in one of the chambers on our right-hand side as we went in, there was a blue light. There was a group of men that were already meditating in there. They had their sleeping bags set up for the night.
they're in their pyjamas and sleeping bag.
Okay, so as we went in there, these gentlemen looked disturbed that we were going in there, and they didn't realise, I think, that we were only going to be in there and then leave. And they didn't look like they were very happy about us being in there at all. Like, this was the true equinox, you know, it wasn't the commercial equinox. This is the time where, at that time of the year, the sun and the moon were both visible in the sky at the same time, and energies are balanced, so they were obviously going to use those energies. And the best way to have an altered consciousness experience in some of these places is simply to go to sleep. So they were going to go to sleep and see what happened. Sleep temples. Right? There's quite a tradition of doing that there, as there are in many temples around the world, most notably over at Abydos in Egypt.
We slowly approached the furthermost room. Shay observed little lights straight away, and you could feel there was something reverent about the room.
And as we entered the big chamber, there was a small part that had been bricked in down the bottom, and I could see small lights in it. And I asked Corin, were there any fireflies or glowworms in this part of England? And he said no. And it looked like these little lights were flashing and coming on in there. And then they just suddenly stopped. And when I pointed at them, we just missed getting a photo of them, but there were a few other lights there. The fact that the lights stopped made me a little bit hesitant.
When we got to the end of the chamber, Shay said to me, look, I can see the lights coming through the stones from the other end of the chamber, from the far end of the chamber. And I thought, I looked and I saw the light. I thought, that's very strange.
So Jules and I and Corin spaced out within the temple, within the what we're calling the temple piece. We were in the end chamber.
Because I knew that this barrow, the part that you can walk in, where the stones are surrounding us, is only about a third of the barrow. The actual barrow on the outside is much longer, and the bit we were in was only about a third of the barrow. So there was clearly, I mean, they don't build these things and just add a little bit of soil at the end. Clearly there must have been chambers at the end there, but they've been blocked off. And it's a bit of a mystery, really, because nobody really has made any record of what lay beyond the chambers that are there now. And there's clearly, at the very end, there's a very small rectangular hole which has been bricked off with smaller bricks, much smaller stones, and clearly is a modern innovation. So, to my view, there was definitely a chamber beyond that, but nothing. There's no written evidence of it at all. So, it is a mystery.
And Corin was leading the proceedings, and he suggested that we have a meditation. So we extinguished our torches. There was definitely something in there. As we extinguished our torches, we caught this flash of spirit that was in the chamber with us. And as soon as I extinguished the torch, I got a very, very strong message to get out of here now. And I turned around to Jules, who was to my right and slightly behind me, and I went, I've just got a message to get out now, really loud and clear. And she was like, okay, let's leave. So she left straight away, and Corin was like, no, I'm going to lay down and have a meditation. And I could hear his feet moving on the gravel as he laid down, and for a half a second I hesitated and leant forward into the chamber to possibly, I was thinking, oh, maybe I'm misinterpreting things here. You know, worst thing psychics ever do is doubt themselves. But
I felt safe and protected in the space, but Shay was not feeling quite like that. At one stage, Shay turned around and she told me that Spirit was telling her to get out. I immediately turned and left because Shay has had much more experience in this than I have. When I got out, Shay wasn't behind me, she was still in the barrow.
Anyway, I went in there and I lay down on the ground and started to meditate, and Shay went outside, and she told me when I went outside that she got hit by something.
But as I leant forward to sit down and meditate with him, I got a biff, and it was so it wasn't from the top, it was from the right hand side and up. So there was nothing over there at all. And I was just stunned for a second. I could feel that my left hand side of my eye had been hit very hard. And I thought, this is lovely. I've got the message, I'm leaving here now. So I turned completely around in a circle, put my hand on the right hand side of the chamber as I was leaving, and just walked straight back out. And there was more light outside than there was in the chamber. The chamber was completely pitch black. I hurried outside, and I was touching my eye where I got hit, because I felt like I got hit in the nose and the eye, and I was touching my eye, and it was so dark I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, but I could feel there was moisture there. It didn't really hurt to start off with. You know, when you first get hit and it's a bit of a shock, it didn't really hurt. And I could feel moisture there. So when I got out, I looked at Jules, and Jules looked at me in horror. She just had this horrified look in her face, and then she started to giggle a bit. I looked at her and I said, have I got blood on my face? And then she looked at me in horror and shock, and I think her shock made her giggle a bit. And she went, yeah, and she pulled out some wet ones and she started wiping my face. Apparently the blood had started dripping on the ground. So, yeah, and she started calling out to Ken to come down and help. So Ken came straight down off the top and was like, what's going on here? What's going on here? Yeah, so I got a split over my eye and a cut on my nose, and I had a black eye for most of the rest of the trip. It came up, it was a good shiner. It was very pronounced for the next week or so, but for the next 2 weeks of the trip I had a black eye in all the photos. You may notice in some of my previous videos, even though I covered it up with makeup, one of my eyes is a little bit like that, a little bit squished. Yeah, because I had a bit of a black eye.
A few minutes later, she came out saying, am I bleeding? And she had blood across her face, and she had blood on her hand where she'd touched the wound. We mopped it up, and she said something had hit me inside the structure.
And then I'd heard some noises from downstairs and a bit of commotion down in the entrance. So I went down to the entrance, and Shay said she'd been hit. And there was other people there at the time, but they had already left. So her eye was split and bleeding from what we could see in the light. And Jules was looking after her. And
She was standing in the middle of the chamber and suddenly got bashed on the head by something. And we don't know what it was.
But I went inside the cave and immediately felt at ease. All the walls were smooth. I felt so comfortable in there. There was a massive amount of male energy in there, but I just felt relaxed, and the whole cave seemed relaxed at that time after the girls had left. So, yeah, and I walked through the cave in total darkness, feeling all the walls, it was just so smooth, and there was no overhanging. I'm a lot taller than Shane. I just walked through, trying to feel any maybe sharp objects or overhangs or anything like that, but I couldn't see anything.
There is no stones that actually jut out of place in the structure. It's all incredibly well built and incredibly smooth in there. So we're not really sure what hit Shay, but it certainly did a good job. She was left with a shiner for a few days after that.
A phenomenal experience. Then the next day, Shay had a black eye and a split above her eye, and as she said to me, that she was told to get out and didn't heed the warning. So, and
when we spoke with Ken, he said he felt a very male energy, a very masculine energy in the place.
And I spent a bit of time in there, and just do a little bit of a meditation and stuff like that, but massive amounts of male energy at that time. But I felt very welcomed in there.
Did you feel like it was a men's business site?
Oh, most certainly it was men's business site. It was totally.
But the message I got from this was that it was definitely a male business site. And the second message I got was, when spirit tells you something, listen to it and go. You know, there is a reason for this. Corin told me that it was a very strong masculine place, that there had been headhunters here, that there was possible consumption of human beings, that it was a really strong energy. We didn't feel threatened walking in, but when I got this message to go, leave, they certainly didn't want me opening a portal in there, which I had done in quite a few of the other places, which was my intention when I went in. I was going to use sound, use the music of the spheres to create a portal and open that up. I believe that they were telling me very strongly not to open a portal in there on that night, especially being female in a masculine tradition.
But it's possible it was the guardian of the barrow. For whatever reason, took offence, I don't know.
At one point I accidentally took a photograph in the dark when our lights were turned off, and when we got home I lightened the photograph and found the eerie green figure of a man in the picture. There's nothing in the cave that would look like that in that angle. There was no light either to be reflecting off any surface. So what do you think of it?
But I've had some very, very strange things happen in that barrow before today. I relate some of this in my books, the Touchwood Chronicles. In book 1, I relate when we went as the Cat tribe there. A group of shamanic workers went down there, and we slept in their chamber overnight. There was nobody else around, and we slept in there overnight. I had the most strangest vision when I woke up at the dawn, and I really felt like I'd been transported 6,000 years ago. And I was really confused for quite some time, because I felt like I'd been transported. And the vision I had was I was a worker that had been building this barrow, and I'd been instructed by the druids to build this barrow in a certain way, and I watched them do the measurements. I watched them do the very careful alignments to the rising sun, exactly as it was meant to be. And we had to build it with all these specific measurements. And what the ceremonies they did this is all in my dream that I had before I woke up, and I felt like I was still there 6,000 years ago. And I'd seen other shamans at work in other barrows, different parts of the country, and they took the bones of the dead and they ground them in the big bowls that were found in there, big stone bowls. They ground the bones up in the big bowls and mixed them with barley flour and made bread with it. And the whole tribe ate of the bread, they'd eat of their ancestors. And I do believe this is the very, very beginning of the Eucharist.
Anyway, So that was my experience in the Long Barrow at West Kennet. I had an experience.
So when you were on top of it, were you making a deal with Spirit to go and smack Shay in the face?
No, not exactly.
Okay.
You know, good things come to those who wait.
So what Corin didn't tell us was this is a site where English blokes or tourists take their missus to get a bit of a biff around the ears. It's a sorting out place. It was one of those moments when I was glad to be single. So yeah, married ladies, keep away from the place.